Hi, intuitive viewers, and welcome. I am very excited today to introduce you to Ginette Biro. Hi, Ginette. How are you?
Good.
So Ginette is a powerful medium. She's clairvoyant, clairaudient, clairsentient, and claircognizant. So all the clairs, right? Um, so that means she can hear, see, feel, and know information from spirit and other dimensions. We'll get into that. um, since Ginette was a child, she has been channeling from the fourth to the 12th dimensions. Again, we'll get into that too. I can't wait. Connecting people to the other side and bringing messages to inspire and inform the world. Ginette has many spirit guides and ascended masters and beings who are guiding her to support the planet in its ascension. In addition to these remarkable gifts, she has spent soul time on the other side through a near-death experience, which I cannot wait for you guys to hear. And this has allowed her to see and understand how our life blueprint and soul's journey actually works. So Ginette, I have so many questions, but so I want to ask you first kind of about who you were before the NDE, because you're going to tell us the NDE story, which is it's fascinating. But just kind of talk about a little bit who you were, what was happening in your life before this experience, if you can.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so growing up, I felt like I was a pretty normal kid. Even though things were happening to me, I didn't feel like out of this world. Yet retrospectively, I can't believe that I was managing the two or trying to manage them or stumble around with them. So and I say that because after high school, I went to university. I got a degree in kinesiology, a diploma in sports science, and although I was working on my mediumship slowly, I was also doing very 3D things and doing acute care rehabilitation for people post injury, all that kind of stuff, right? Personal training. So I spent a lot of time in that realm, and it was in that realm dealing with one on one clients and patients that my mediumship really opened. And so I was doing something very left brain to me. And in that, I was observing a lot of things beyond the left brain. I was seeing, hearing, and feeling things that I hadn't really worked with or figured out. Yes, they were kind of there as a kid, but I didn't have any formal understanding about what was happening. And so that brought me to the journey of really discovering and opening my mediumship. And so at the time, or just before my NDE, I had already been a working medium for about a decade.
Oh,
I'd
wow.
already been communicating with spirit. I thought I had a really good understanding, and I did have a good understanding of death and all that from the spirit's perspective of the thousands of spirits I had spoken to at that point. And I say all of this because the experience of my NDE was so much more than what I was already experiencing as a medium. The information, the validity was so much more. As a medium, I already believed in the afterlife, obviously, because I'm talking to spirits, right?
Right.
But I would still, have moments of questioning, right? It's a very normal human thing where we question, like, am I crazy? Am I making this up? And even though people would say, what you said was true, or how could you have known that? And I'm like, it's not me that knows it, it comes through, right?
Right.
But what happened with my NDE that was really standoutish to me was that it completely erased that last percent of doubt, or 0.5% of doubting anything after literally being there. So, leading up to my NDE, I was full on doing my mediumship, busy mom, 2 kids, balancing life and spirit, just walking along doing that, thinking I had a really good idea
Right.
of everything that was going on. And then little did I know spirit was going to whisk me into an even greater expansion of my own consciousness from my NDE experience.
So it's fascinating. And I can already anticipate that people are probably thinking about an NDE experience. I would love that experience, and other people think that would terrify me. So talk about your NDE, where it began, and kind of, yeah, just tell us the story.
Sure. So my NDE was almost exactly, we're getting near to exactly 3 years ago.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
it was August 30th, 2019. And so leading up to my NDE, I had been very weakened already. I struggled with really heavy periods. So I was hemorrhaging every month, and everything, every kind of intervention they did to try and stop it of the myriad of different ways, it wasn't working. So we'd finally agreed to do a very routine surgery to put an end to that for me. Um, and leading up to my NDE, I had this spirit kept bringing me, dropping me little hints, right? Which was really getting frustrating because if I do a mediumship reading, I can just open up for someone and bring through all this stuff. But I kept trying to open up for me, and they were dropping, I always call it dangling carrots, right? They were dangling carrots in front of me. And finally, one day before my, I think a couple days before my NDE, I had this revelation that something was going to happen. And I assumed I would have some kind of cool astral experience or a neat dream communication while I was under, something like that, right? I didn't expect it necessarily to be an NDE, even though that was in fact, in retrospect, put in front of me. It didn't clue into it, which is funny. But so I go in the morning of my surgery, and I remember when they were wheeling me into the OR. I kept having this excitement energy, something like building in me, almost like, when you're a kid, or even now, still for me anyway, when I'm sitting at the top of a water slide and I'm waiting for them to say, okay, you can go, there's this
Right.
anticipation of going, right? That's what it was feeling like going into surgery. And I've had surgery before, and I don't usually get excited, right? I'm not like, yes, right? It's just kind of a thing you have to do. But this one, I was so excited. And so I remember when the doctor told me that the anesthesiologist was going to put me under, I was like, all right, let's go. Right? And so they knocked me out. And what happened was I landed essentially on the other side. And I knew I was on the other side because it was vastly different from any other experience I've had with spirit or my own astral travels or even out of body experience type things. It was very different because it was as real in comparison to here, but it was there, right? So it was my grandmother who's in spirit that came to get me and brought me over there. And I remember walking up this grass, and it was the most beautiful green, lush summer grass. And I was walking bare feet, and as I was standing like upright walking, I could zero in on any blade of grass I wanted. Like I could just see finite detail if I wanted. It was just accessible. And then I remember noticing the sky was like the most perfect summer sky blue. All the colors were heightened, and the vibrancy and even the vibration of the other side, I just knew where I was, because I want to say that as a medium, I'm not allowed on the other side. Spirits can come from the other side to talk to me
Right.
here, or I can meet them in the astral realm, or I can peer through almost like a window or lens to the other side. And that would be like looking down on a stadium, but I can't get on the ground of the stadium, right? I can't
Right.
get on the other side. Anytime I've ever been close, I've been kicked back, right?
Right.
And so this one, I knew I was on the other side. And so as I was walking up, I walked up to this like summer picnic barbecue type thing. And there was that like checker pattern tablecloths. And as I looked around, it was everyone that I knew, and so many souls gathered from people I knew in this lifetime and even people I knew from lifetimes before that I didn't have conscious memory of, but I knew them. And it was these reunions and hugs of, oh my gosh, what have you been up to since I saw you? And what's been going on here? And oh, let me tell you this story. And so I spent what felt like hours reconnecting and reuniting with family members, friends from this lifetime and beyond. And after what felt like hours, then my grandmother took me to this other place. And it was this place at the very edge of the universe, is how I understood it. And it was this completely white room. And outside kind of the windows was galaxies, but where the universe is creating itself. So that's why I say it was kind of like the edge of the universe. It was a place I'd never known. And again, I call it the room of the blueprints because in this white room, my guides and my counsel were there, and my grandmother was beside me. And on this giant white boardroom table, kind of marble looking, I guess, they rolled out what looked like blueprints. And I remember I kind of almost like chuckled a little bit because I was like, these look like architect blueprints, right? Like, what is this? And they're like, this is your life path. And my guides had always explained our lives kind of like a tapestry. So before my NDE, when I would talk to people, I would talk about the tapestry, right? Like the weaving of your tapestry. And but this time they showed it to me like a blueprint. And it was really interesting because down the center of it, I could see this kind of like white iridescent line that was still pulsing. So I knew somehow I was still alive because it was still, the energy was alive in it. And what happened is we reviewed with my counsel my life up until that point. So I went through my life review up to the point of where I was. And it was at that point where they asked me if I wanted to stay or come back. And I was like, oh, I didn't know we were doing this. Like, and it was really interesting because it was this automatic but not rushed reaction of saying, yes, I definitely want to come back. I didn't feel pressure that I had to stay or pressure that I had to come back. It was completely up to me. But I also remember the perspective I had as the soul of how much I valued the human life, right? Like the human existence. Everything that I had been through up until that point, from the soul perspective, I was like, wow, I don't want to give all that up yet. I want to build on that because that has been so much growth. And so it was interesting that that was me viewing the me here, right? Like same, but different.
Right. Right.
And so they said, they're like, okay, if you want to go back, you can. Here's what you can do though. And they said, with what's remaining of your life, and I know that it is this much on the blueprint, it's about this much, but I don't know what that's in reference to because when I, in my memories of it, look back to what we reviewed, my guide is blocking me here, so I can't see how long we reviewed. And they'll do that
Okay.
purposely so that I can't figure out, does this reference 20 years, 5 years, 30 years? I have no idea what this is, but I know
Right.
it's this, right?
Right.
And so they said that I could change some things around for the remainder of my life here. And because when we were going through my life review, I saw that there was different juncture points of pieces of destiny that we essentially create before we come in. And so when they said that I could change it around, I was like I can take one out because it kind of looked like fuses from a fuse box. And I was like, I can take one out and replace it. And they're like, yes. I was like, really? And so that's when I really understood that we co-create what we're going to go through in this lifetime based on the juncture points or the fuse points of what we want to learn, the main lessons. We create that with our counsel and our guides in our blueprint before we come in because I got to go back, assess what I'd done, and then change anything I needed to, which was so interesting. And so I remember they said you can change out many, but you will only remember the first one. And I was like, okay, like I'll only consciously
Oh.
remember the first one. And the first one I vividly remember, it was about chronic health issues because
Oh.
I had chronic health issues, right? Like I was just always the canary in the coal mine of the family that if someone was going to go down with something, it was going to be me, right?
Right.
And so I remember I pulled out this fuse and I was like, are you sure? Like for real? I can do this? And they're like, yes, you can. And I replaced it with another one. And I remember I was like, I don't know, is that really going to work? We'll see about that because I have a good history of, being the sick
Right.
one.
Right.
I put that in. And then I remember changing several others, but I didn't have a recollection of what those were. Like they said, you won't remember what they are until they happen. And so after I'd done that, they asked me again, they said, are you sure you want to go back? Because it'll be very easy to just keep you here. Your body was weakened to a certain state that it'd be a simple, they showed it like a flick of a switch, and I would have a heart attack that they wouldn't be able to revive me from. And I was like, no, I'd like to go back. And so they're like, okay. And so my grandmother in that moment, I was with my grandmother again, and I heard the nurse say in recovery, Ginette, are you awake? Because again, my experience on the other side, the whole thing felt like it had to have been 24 hours, but my surgery and the time I was under was 20 minutes, right? And so the nurse says, Ginette, are you awake? And I remember feeling my spirit go back into my body. My eyes were closed still. And I have to say that when I wake up from surgery, I'm usually a groggy, silly mess, right? I'm someone I can have a children's Tylenol and that'll do a lot for me, right? So um, I come back into my body. I can still feel my grandmother here. And she asks if I'm okay. And within this split second, I hear my higher self come through me very clearly to the nurse and say, I need you to write something down for me. This is very important. And I'm like listening to this. It's my voice, but I'm listening to the clarity come through. And I said, I'm a medium. I need you to write these 4 things down for me so that I can remember what happened. And so the nurse stopped what she was doing. She's like, okay, honey, what would you like
Oh,
to say?
wow.
I know. And she wrote them down, and I have it here. I keep it on my desk, actually. This was the paper from surgery. And so the words won't make sense to others. It says, Baba, tree roots, time to entwine, and I went far. So for people that wouldn't make sense, but what it did is after she folded it up, put it in my hand, a couple days later when I no longer had pain meds because my higher self jumped in to talk to the nurse to have this written down before I had any pain meds in my body because they knew that if I had pain meds, I would question the validity. So she folds it up, puts it in. A couple days later, I read it. And when Spirit was like, it's time to read the note, I looked at it, read those 4 things, and the whole experience flooded back to me in vivid detail. And it was just
Oh my gosh.
profound. And so I find one of the greatest things that I learned, not only did it amplify my access to spirit and communication and channeling, but what it did is it made a couple things really simple. And one of those was that conscious choice is really our greatest gift. The understanding of that blueprint was that as a soul, we consciously choose the things we wish to experience. Like, for example, my chronic health issues gave me certain perspectives that really helped me grow into who I am from my journey. But when I didn't need it anymore from that soul perspective, I could remove it, right? So I realized that we consciously choose as souls with our counsel things we want as specific lessons in this lifetime. But then as humans, this version of me, we get to consciously choose how we react to those specific juncture points, both good and not so good that happen, right? Those challenging ones or those really good ones. In every moment of our lives, we get to consciously choose what we want to do. And as simple as that sounds, that's when we become powerful creators, is when we consciously choose, like, what do you want to do now? Like in Frozen. I don't know if you guys have seen Frozen. If you're watching, but there's a point when Anna's talking about the next right step. And that's so accurate. The only thing you can do next is the next right step for you. And what is that? How does it feel to you? And so that really changed my perspective and outlook on life, and purpose is about just growing so much as a human and consciously choosing to get the most out of everything we do while we're here, because I got to see how much I valued my humanity, which was really profound. So, I mean, that's my NDE in a very condensed nutshell. I mean, of course, my book expands the whole lead up and the whole thing. But yeah, that was it.
That is amazing. And I'm reading your book right now. So I know what you're talking about, because it goes into there is so much detail in this experience. I almost can't believe it. It really is amazing. But I want to ask, I mean, oh my gosh, I have a million questions, but when you talked about the excitement and the anticipation going in before, do you think that you were anticipating the experience to come? And if so, does that mean it was a pre-planned event? Do you think it was a pre-planned event that you have this visit?
I really do. I think it was a significant juncture point in my journey of, I absolutely believe it was pre-planned. And that I could have absolutely stayed on the other side with no guilt or karma. Um, yeah.
And well, we'll get to the council. I wanted to just kind of go kind of chronologically as you go. And when you talk about the picnic with your family, I just find that so it's so quaint, right? So great. There's just a family picnic going on.
Mhm.
Um, was that, do you think now, and did you feel like then that it was a scene arranged for you? This was a scene that you would be familiar, that would be comfortable. But do you think that the scene of the picnic was something that was for you personally?
Mhm.
Um, yeah, for do you think that was,
Well, you know
yeah.
what's funny is I kind of chuckled after because I was like, I would have thought if I picked my own NDE scene, I would have landed in a tropical island. Okay, because I love the tropics and I love the heat. So, I mean, if I was to design one, that's what I think I would have done. But the neat thing about that is I have so many fond memories as a kid of family picnics outside at parks that I guess have just always been there, but I'd never really talked about them or recognized the significance of them. So it was interesting because that was in fact a very comfortable setting. It was warm, it was summer, I could be bare feet, right? And there was like snacks and goodness and noise and people. So it was, I mean, it wasn't what I would have thought, but it was exactly what would welcome me with so much just ease and grace. And that's one thing I want to say quickly about the other side is that I couldn't explain it. I struggle even still to explain the energy there is of bliss. But I find in human terms, we think of bliss as euphoria or excess, but it wasn't bliss in excess. It was harmony. It was balanced, absolute joy, but balanced, right? Like it's something that we don't quite get here. So yeah, it was essentially an environment of that.
And it's fascinating. And when you talk about like hugging people and eating and stuff like that, was it the same? Was it heightened? Did it feel the same as here? What was the difference?
I remember seeing the food. I don't remember vividly eating the food, but it was there and it was as if I could. But I vividly remember hugging people, and that was exactly like hugging people here. But the energy exchange was like the energy of, when you hug family members, but then when you hug a toddler who comes running at you and they throw their arms at you and they just give you everything of them, that's like a little more, right? That's what those hugs felt like with every single person. And it wasn't the intensity of them throwing themselves at me, but the energy exchange of those hugs spoke so much more.
That's
Again.
kind of the feeling that I get, is that it's like a hug, but it's heightened somehow. And I love the way you put it as an energy exchange,
Mhm.
because just recently I think that I was talking about it was either a dream that I had or kind of a daydream I had or something, but I got that when we hug, when we kiss, that we're actually we're mimicking what we do on the other side.
Yep.
It's an energy exchange. And
100%.
I'm getting chills with that for some reason. We mimic it. And that's what we're doing when we do that here. We're actually mimicking there rather than, vice versa.
Yep.
That's very interesting. You put it that way.
Mhm.
Can you talk a little bit? I know people are going to have a lot of questions about the council. So
Yeah.
can you talk a little bit more about the council? Because I think for some people, especially people that grew up in maybe an organized religion, when you think about people who you feel like have authority or know more than you do on the earth plane, sometimes you can feel intimidated or inferior. Did you feel any of that, or was it very equal footing, but you kind of respected these people? How were the council different than you, or even maybe your guides?
Mhm.
How did you, yeah, how can you explain the council and kind of their place?
I think that's a beautiful question. And I love that you're bringing it up because there is no hierarchy there. And there's no hierarchy even here with my council, say, versus your council or anybody watching. We all have a council of spirit guides, say ascended masters, family members, or friends, a group of souls that are invested in helping us, each of us individually. We have it. We all have a spirit guide, a lifetime guide, maybe several spirit guides of different forms, which can be religious figures, can be it can be many different things. It's so not limited to how we try to box it, right? So in my council, there's been times where I've seen Jesus and I've seen Mother Mary, as much as I've seen an ascended master, Sanat Kumara, as much as I've seen light beings, Buddha. It's not limited to. And so we will usually feel drawn to those frequencies of beings that have the most resonance with us in a lifetime. So for some people, their council could be made up of very much specific religious figures they are comfortable with for that lifetime, but it's not limited to that. And so we all have a council. And what's interesting is within that council, some of them have had many human lifetimes already and they have no need to come back. So they come in as, someone who's like an elder, right? An elder of sorts, someone who is a wise person that carries lots of wisdom. So there is a lot of respect to that elder-like member, but it's not different than the respect to my spirit guide or the respect that I would have shown to, say, Mother Mary or my grandmother. It's all harmonized. And so when you're in the presence, the conscious presence of your council, it's actually this beautiful home feeling of reconnecting with your people that are invested in helping you make the most of your lifetime, right? And what's really interesting is some of us too have had opportunities of being a part of somebody else's council where they chose to come in a lifetime and we were like, you know what, I'm not going to come in this generation. I'm going to wait for, the year, whatever is my calling. So in the meantime, I'm going to help you with yours.
Right.
Right. So like it's so unlimited and beyond the boxes that we try to confine it to.
Right. And we do that as human beings with everything, right? We try to label and because we need to understand it somehow. So we kind of do that naturally. Yeah. And so something that I find really interesting about your NDE that's a little bit different than a lot of NDEs is that you were eager to come back. It was like, I want to come back. And you also seem like you have a real respect for the human experience after this experience where some people will feel like, oh, it's dumb down here, it's so great up there, it's not great, or it's great there, it's not great here, but you didn't have that. You kind of are like, this is very important, and what I'm doing, this is a very it's something that helps us grow so much and expand so much. So can you speak to that for just a second about how it changed your respect for just being here, being on the earth plane, and can you help us, the ones that are kind of like, oh, it's kind of stupid here sometimes, how you kind of think about that now, problems that come up, or little, things where, I lose my keys and things like that, how you kind of view life, now that you've had this experience.
Yeah, that's such a real statement because leading up to this, I totally, as everybody else, had moments of like, what am I doing here?
Yeah.
Like, why am I on Earth? Why do people come to Earth to be here? I don't get it, right? And as spiritual or religious or awakened as we are, I think it's a very human thing to question that. Because I think as humans, sometimes we get really caught in the density of 3D world, 3D drama, 3D fears, and being stuck in that 3D density whirls us. We just ruminate and circle, right? And that's hard. And sometimes we knock ourselves out of that and we're like, oh my gosh, I don't want to be here. So I think that's very normal. Now, what I found that really changed it for me in an instant is, when they asked if I wanted to come back, my first response being yes, of course, was because of my family, my kids, right? Like I wanted to be there for them, as many people I know here would be like, I would never want to actually because I have kids and yada, yada, right? But It was when I got to witness my higher self, my soul self, and see the awe and wonder and fascination, but also like deep gratitude that my soul self felt for my human experience and my human self. I got, because again, it's like an energy exchange. And although they're one and the same, I got to experience that version of me and how much I loved this version of me and how much I found so much beauty in everything this version of me had been through, the triumphs and the pitfalls, right? The mistakes and the successes and everything in between. And so that was one that radically changed it for me. And the other was through that perspective, I just saw how valuable every lesson that we have when we come here is. How we learn wisdom through everything we go through. We can't just read wisdom in a book and think we know it. We can read it and regurgitate it, but we don't know the wisdom until we experience it. And that's why we come to this 3D world of that mucky mess sometimes, because through that we have these moments where we gain wisdom and we're like, wow, because of that, I learned this, and this piece now is a part of my moral soul structure of who I am. Right? And so souls on the other side value human lives so much because this is where we get to gain so much wisdom in actually a small amount of time. And so it's just our human 3D density that makes us forget that. So for me, it was that perspective just changed it. And so it's funny now, I still have moments where I'm like, I mean, where I question, like, why do people come to Earth? But instantly I'm reminded of that experience and I'm like, no, I chose to come back here. What am I learning from this? And I can flip it really fast now.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, because there's so much we can gain from this human experience if we get conscious about it, right? If we
Right.
consciously choose our actions because of the things, that's when again we become co-creators with the universe instead of just following the cycle of 3D, rumination.
Right. Yeah, that's a great. Yeah, I love all of that. I love that explanation as well. Um, I also, this is just kind of an aside thing that I'm just wondering as you're talking about your oversoul and uh, what did you look like? What does your higher self look like? What did the people at the picnic look like? Did they look like people? Did they
Hmm.
look more lighted? Did they have a different hue to them? What did they look like?
That's a really great question. Me, I looked just like me, right? So like dark hair, like what I look like. My higher self, it's interesting because when I was me, I was in from my view. As soon as my higher self was speaking, I was in the consciousness from the eyes of my higher self looking at me. So I could be in both places at the same time. Again, I'm not limited to the 3D construct of reality. We're talking higher construct. So both of those looked like me. Um, my higher, well, yeah, okay, I'll just say both of those look like me. The other people that I saw that connected with, um, they looked like everything at the same time. And again, this is not going to make sense. Our brains are going to want to qualify this better, but the best way that I can is they looked like them in life. At the same time, they looked like them at their healthiest point in life. At the same time, they also looked like soul frequency and color in human 3 or 5 point form, all at the same time. So,
Yeah, I understand that. And when you're in that, when you're in, I guess, pure consciousness, right? When you're a soul, you're pure consciousness. Is are you getting more like downloads of like information and conversation? Is it more like a lot at once, or is it in consecutive order, like how I'm speaking to you? Were they speaking? Was it telepathic? Was it many things at once?
um, so it wasn't many at once. It was more chronological in my memory and my
Okay.
experience of it. It was more chronological,
Uh-huh.
but it was a mixture of like verbal, telepathic, but also just energetic exchange. But that all happened harmoniously at the same time. So it's like I could say I felt like I was speaking, but there was
Right.
also just responses at the same time. When I was at the blueprint table, that felt very much like clear voices and
Oh, uh-huh.
beings, but it was also telepathic. Like again, it's energy is exchanged in every form there.
Right.
So it's everything all at once.
Right. Right. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's so interesting to me. And you'd think like, oh, were you confused because all this stuff was happening? But it sounds like it's so harmonious that it just is, it just works. It just
Yeah, and so much so like the one thing that I found took me a little bit once I came back from my NDE was reintegrating back into the density of 3D. Not the density of my body, but the heaviness of the reality we live in, not the expanded, open, loving reality over there that just held me in a state of bliss for I think about 3 days. 3 days I was just like when I came back, right? But then the density started to come back, and I remember almost kind of mourning or being a little detached as I recalibrated to this frequency while keeping the openness to that frequency. It's like I
right,
had to learn to be back in both again because so much of me wanted to hang on to that, but that
right,
doesn't directly apply to here. So I had to harmonize the two and really value the human again, but also hold the spirit at the same time.
right.
Yeah.
Get that balance back of some kind of balance, it sounds like.
Yeah.
Um, so I have a question about the blueprint.
Yeah.
So when you're at the blueprint, you pull the plug on your health issues. Basically, you pull the plug on your health issues, and you had the power to do it. You're kind of given permission, or it's okay to do it. Do you think after that experience and being back here, do you think that we have the ability to pull the plug on lessons that it seems like we're learning over and over again? For example, I feel like my whole life I have instances where I have to stick up for myself. So clearly that's one of my life like lessons I wanted to learn: self-love, self-respect, things like that. So if I feel like, okay, I feel like I've learned everything I can learn, do you feel like we have the ability here to pull the plug on a lesson, or do you feel like it's in the blueprint and we have to be there, that we have to go over it with counsel, or do you feel like we have that ability here?
I think we get to pull the plug or end that journey once we've fulfilled it. So,
Okay.
however it is that we fulfill it. So, again, you're consciously aware of that consistent cycle, right? So, every
Right.
time you stand up for yourself and you answer the call to that, you're fulfilling more and more of what is required to complete that cycle. So,
Okay.
the more you answer the call and step up in your truest self to whatever that is, you are completing the cycle. And in that way, you will get to a point where that no longer is a pertinent issue to your journey.
Right.
Right? So,
Got
like for
it.
me with my NDE, I had completed my journey of chronic illness. And so that's why I could change it at that point, right?
Right.
Had had that not been a juncture point for me to have my NDE and I had completed all those things, then I mean maybe it would have just been like, oh, I didn't have chronic health issues anymore. But I feel what spirit did is it gave me the insight in the back end of how that works. So I could
Right.
explain it. Yeah.
And so you kind of talked a little bit about the after effects, like coming back and kind of reintegrating into
Yeah.
this human life. Um, do you feel like your abilities were heightened?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Definitely. Uh,
and yeah,
yeah. No, sorry. Go ahead.
no, I was just going to say, do you think they were partly heightened because that doubt is just not there anymore? Um, that's kind of a little wall that we put up when we are like, oh, is this just my mind? Is it me? Is it them? Is it, and that's not there really anymore. It sounds like you're kind of like you're all in. Did that make part of the difference in your heightened abilities?
I would imagine so, yeah, because you're right. Doubt is very much a blocker. Doubt is a lower frequency. I mean, when we sit in doubt, it can drag us down. To question and
Right.
doubt something in a moment is just consciousness, right? But
Right.
when we sit in that doubt, it starts to pull us down, just like when we sit in sadness or anger, it pulls us down. So I think that was part of it. But I also think there was a certain change in frequency that happened to my soul when it recognized in consciousness the other side. I think it got like an upgrade or just a higher frequency. And so, what a higher
Right.
frequency means here is like when I'm connecting to spirit in a reading, for example, I take my normal vibration and I up it. And so, as a kid, when I would randomly be seeing spirits, if this is 3D and here's 4, say this is 4D, here's 3D. As a kid, some days I wouldn't realize I would be up in 4D in my energy and I would be seeing spirit things. And other days I would be down here not seeing them. And that's when I thought I was crazy, right?
Right.
But what happened is I think when I came back from the other side, instead of coming back to here, I came back to here. So that when I up my frequency, I can now up to here versus before I could up it to here. Right? And so part of that I think is doubt, but part of it I think is just the frequency recalibration I got from having consciousness there. Right?
Right.
I brought the consciousness back with me because we
Right.
all have it inside us. We all have the ability to access higher frequency. We just have to continually unravel layers to let us get there until it becomes a conscious reality. So I think I took that conscious reality back with me.
Right. That and that's exactly what it sounds like when you talk about it, is kind of like you brought it here.
Mhm.
And you know, do you have I mean, it sounds like you kind of went through a little bit of kind of like yeah, a little bit when you were kind of recalibrating. Do you have you been able to go back in the same way,
Um,
uh having
no,
had that experience? Or okay.
no. So I can go up to higher realms. I can astral travel with more ease. I can have greater outer body experiences in meditation, connect with spirits, channel all that. But from my understanding, anyways, you can't get to the other side, have feet on the other side, unless it's your exit point. You can't actually
Okay.
get there. I've been close to the door, like I said before, walking other souls there, but usually 3 steps before that door, and my energy is propelled backwards, like actually head over feet
Oh
backwards.
wow. Oh my
Because the
gosh.
energy is it's so strong there that it'll pull souls in, not in a scary way, but like it's so strong, so
Right.
it'll usually repel those that it's not their time to go. It'll actually push them away, right?
Right.
So I haven't been able to have feet on the ground there.
Right.
So it's very different. And interestingly enough, I had a surgery, one more surgery a year after that NDE one. And so I was like, I wonder, am I going to be here? Am I going to see the other side? And I didn't, right? So
Okay.
it was very
Right.
much through that one experience, right? And I was open, ready, whole same deal, but it was not the same at all.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
And my, my kind of, I mean, I have a million questions, obviously, but my last kind of question for this interview is what does your family think? What is your family? I mean, has your family been with you the whole time? Like, you know, you accepted you're a medium, accepted all these things, or are to a point, are they completely supportive? How does your family react? Are you and friends too?
Yeah. So, I mean, I'm very lucky to have a lot of supportive people around me, which is beautiful. I didn't grow up in a family of mediums, though. We didn't,
Oh,
um, there wasn't a family. Oftentimes, there's like a family line, right? Like a
right,
very sensitive grandmother who was intuitive and this, and you can track it. I mean, we can kind of put some links in some ways, but it was never openly discussed ever in my family line on either side. Um, and as a kid, I think my parents were just trying to figure out or trying to figure me out. I don't think they questioned mediumship when I was a
right,
kid. So it was a lot of trying to just figure things out until I told them one day, when I was a little bit older, that I was like, I see and talk to spirits, right? And so they weren't put off by that or afraid, but I think they were kind of like, okay, all right, we'll see, right? And same with, my family and friends, it was kind of like, okay, we'll see. And some were totally open, and some it took a little bit of time to warm up to, but
Mhm.
over, the last almost 2 decades now, decade and a half, I think there have been enough like cause and effect things that have happened
Right,
repeatedly of this and that, this and that, this and that, or messages I've passed on to so and so that mentioned to someone else that it was validated, or this was true, or this premonition was
Right.
true, or this, that now it's an understood, known, and supported thing. And I
Right.
appreciate that so much, because I can very much understand how hard it would be to open up to this if people aren't ready, which is why I never want to push this on anyone. It's more like the information is here if you want it, which was one of my agreements after my NDE. My guides were like, okay, so if you're going back, we would like for you to really step up and step out. Because before that, I had a fully busy mediumship schedule, but it was only by word of mouth. I didn't really talk about what I did. It was just word of mouth. And it was after that after my NDE, that I started Avalon Spirit. I started my podcast. I started my videos of, do you want to know about ghosts? Do you want to know about this, right? Like, I started putting the information out there so that it's available for those that land on it. But never would I want to push the information to say, you have to believe this, because I really believe we all come to a point of opening to higher consciousness when we are ready. And if we force it before that, people are just going to close down. And so that's how I've kind of kept it with my family. It's like, those that want to know more, I'm here. And if you don't want to, that's okay. We can talk about other stuff. So,
Right.
yeah.
Right. And when you say see, do you see spirits with your eyes or with your mind's eye?
Both.
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 Okay.
Sometimes they'll show up literally in front of me. It's regular. It's daily. Daily, I'll see spirits with my actual eyes, either as orbs or as shadows or as they are, but also equally in my mind's eye. Oftentimes, I'll be talking to somebody, and information or words or images will start to come into my mind. And oftentimes, I'm like, not right now. We're not doing that right now.
I can't wait.
Yeah.
Well, oh my gosh, this has been so much fun, Ginette. I could just talk to you for all day and just keep on asking you questions. But I want to let our viewers know where they can find you, what your projects are, how they can get in touch with you if they want to. And by the way, I love your YouTube channel. It's very, for me, it's just the energy of it is so uplifting. It's almost like I'm very interested in what you're saying, but it almost doesn't matter in a way, because I just feel such a nice energy. I'm just like, oh, it's just so, it's just like, having a, going into the sunshine or something. So I really appreciate that. But can you tell people how to find you and what you're doing?
Yeah, so avalonspirit.com is my website. So on there is, you can find my podcast on there, but also the different courses I'm teaching, like Lightworker Mentorship Circle for one. If you're wanting to open your gifts, there's a level 1 and 2, as well as the Cosmic Consciousness Circle. That's if you want to go way out into big cosmic stuff. That's a once a month thing that I put on, where we dive into a topic that Spirit brings through. So that's always fun. As well, we have on Avalon Spirit many different, we call them personal journey guides, so different mediums, healer, astrologer, all those kinds of things that are vetted by me. So people that I have worked with that are very gifted in what they do, to kind of help people unravel their journey, because there's not one way to do it.
Right.
So Avalon Spirit's a great avenue, but as well, like you said, my YouTube channel, Ginette Biro Medium, as well as Instagram, and my podcast, which is the Ginette Biro podcast. Also it's on YouTube and on all the audio platforms. And that's once a week, every Monday. I bring through message insights from Spirit, things, interviews, and then a monthly energy update at the beginning of every month. So there's lots of things out there.
Lots of things. You're very
Available.
busy.
And yeah, and again, like you said, and I really appreciate you saying that too, that it's out there to uplift and bring consciousness. It's not out there to scare anyone, to cause concern. It's more information to maybe help someone understand what's going on, because as humanity and as a collective, we are awakening. More people are experiencing paranormal phenomenon. More people are experiencing intuitions and premonitions and things. And so it's just a place for information that may help you make sense of it, to bring you more ease and comfort. That's the goal.
So important. That's so important. The work you do is very important, Ginette. And I thank you so much for taking the time with us today and sharing your experience and sharing your knowledge. And it's it's just so nice. So thank you so much. And I just want to plug a little bit that you'll be in our book club next. We're reading your book for our book club next month. And so you'll be back at the end of the month to do a Q&A, at which I'm sure people are just going to be so excited to do that. So thank you so much. And thank you, Intuitive viewers, for hanging out with us. And we'll see you again next time. Bye.